English sounds a lot like French, as you can see.
来到教室里，师生们有说有笑。仔细看这堂课的教授很不一样。法国经济学家皮凯提化身一日老师，来到台湾大学传道授业解惑。针对贫富不均的议题，皮凯提加码从不动产谈起。他发现台湾的不动产课税好像太低了。
In most countries, you have an annual property tax, which you pay when you are owner of property. Now, my understanding is that in Taiwan, but I might be wrong, the annual property tax is very small as compared to most other countries. You know, it's like 0.1% of property, real estate property values are, very small. In the US, it will be 1% or sometimes, 1.5, so 10 times more. So a lot of property will complain that this will make them sell the property because they cannot pay the tax. But this is exactly what you want to do. You want them to sell the property so that the prices go down, and some other people who don't have access to property can buy it.
不止皮凯提，与会的台大经济系教授林建甫也认为，从90年代开始，所得就跟不上消费的涨幅。成功大学副教授何志清除了呼应张忠谋要拉高遗产税的态度，也呼吁要尽快推动房地合一的政策。不过，就有学生担心，皮凯提针对贫富不均提出的改革，从政策上要落实有难度，难道要掀起革命才能达到目的吗
？We don't need to wait for to have a global government and a global unified wealth tax to do something. Otherwise, we will wait for a long time. Wealth tax and global tax, there's a lot that can be done at the national level. And it's not just utopia that will require a global government. We can have a step-by-step approach toward more global cooperation.
而皮凯提一直主张的教育改革也受到质疑，在贫富不均的氛围之下，名校的学费穷学生负担不起。皮凯提也坦诚，想靠读书促进阶级流动，实际上要成真有困难。
You have right now the average income of the parents of Harvard University students, corresponds to the top 2% of the distribution of U.S. family incomes, as if the students have been picked at random within the top 2%. Very mobile society, everybody can make it in America, etc. And the reality, which seems to be quite different, working so well, so efficiently. So, we have to. I think that's one of the big challenge for every country.
摇滚经济学家旋风访台，不忘留时间给年轻学子。整场几乎全英文的沟通，法国教授与台湾学生进行一场经济对谈，也为台大学生上了宝贵的一堂课。UDN TV 吴佳邱欣怡台报道。
大家好，欢迎收看全球瞭望，我是郭崇伦。全世界的分配所得不公已经是一个大家非常关心的问题，各地都有各种各样的占领运动发生。在华尔街，我们看到有占领华尔街运动，在别的地方有类似的占领运动。究竟这个所得以及财富的不均是怎么样产生的呢？又用什么方法来解决呢？我们今天要来访问的是法国经济学者，也是最近21世纪资本论的作者，皮凯提教授。Welcome, Dr. Piketty, for coming to our show.
Thank you.
First of all, I want to ask you, how do you characterize those people who earn their fortune or earn their wealth through technology or innovation? What I'm talking about is like people like Mr. Steve Jobs or Mark Zuckerberg or even Bill Gates. Do they deserve their wealth in a sense?
Well, I think I will characterize them as, very useful entrepreneur. Now, do they deserve their wealth? It all depends on the level of their wealth. I think it's not possible to answer these questions, without looking at the number. If their wealth was, the GDP of the entire planet or the wealth of the entire planet, I think everybody would agree that maybe this is a bit too much. And on the other hand, if they only had average wealth, this would be too little. So, there is some social optimum to find. Inequality can be useful. You need to have some level of inequality in order to put incentives on people to become entrepreneurs, to become managers, to make an education. But above a certain level, inequality may not be useful anymore. Or at least this is a subject of empirical investigation. So to me, it's entirely a practical question. It's not an abstract ideological issue. And the only way to make progress on this issue is to try to look at the historical evidence, to try to look at how different inequality levels change across societies. When is it that this is good or bad for growth? You know, we have to have a very practical debate, and I have no a priori at all on this question. You know, it's not my problem. You know, my problem is to collect historical evidence, and in this book, I try to tell, you know, the history of income and wealth distribution across 3 centuries in over 20 countries, so that people can make their own mind. And whatever your political persuasion, you know, I think you will find the historical narrative and the historical evidence that's in this book of some interest. And then people can make their own conclusion about the proper level of inequality.
So you don't agree with those people who can make nothing out of something, that those are the genius.
Something out of nothing.
Without them, it's impossible for those business and those employment to be created. You don't think so?
Oh no, I think they are a genius and they have done very useful things, but you know, they are not Jesus Christ. You know, we need thousands of people to innovate. If you take the case of Bill Gates and Microsoft, you know, without the thousands of computer scientists, you know, who have slowly, you know, invented information technologies, you know, this could not have worked. So innovation in society never relies on only one individual. You know, it's thousands of individuals who do useful things, and it's important that everyone, you know, is rewarded in a way that's in line with his contribution, in line with, you know, a proper, efficient working of society. So you don't want 100% of the economic reward to go to 1 or 2 or 3 individuals. So there is some balance to find.
You also mentioned that it's important that we keep a little bit of differences in the income, or there's an inequality that would be good for the incentive.
Of
you
course.
Agree with it?
But everybody agrees with that. You know, I think there's no look. The problem with this debate is that too often they are expressed in terms that are too abstract and ideological. Right. I think we have to be more practical. Everybody agrees that we need some level of inequality in order to get incentives and to grow. You know, nobody wants to have a China where everybody is poor and everybody is equal in poverty in the 1970s, and everybody agrees that some level of inequality is useful for development. The only interesting question is how much? Where does it stop to be useful? And the only way to make progress on these very difficult questions, which we will never solve with full certainty, is to look at historical evidence, is to compare inequality levels across societies, is to see the different kind of institutions, social institution, educational institution, progressive taxation, that can put powerful capitalist forces and market forces into the common interest, and that can guarantee that, you know, different groups in societies benefit from growth and innovation in a balanced manner. So you cannot answer in an abstract manner whether such or such, you know, a person should get exactly what. You know, I think you have to look at the numbers. Otherwise, it's too abstract and ideological.
Could you explain for us? In your lecture, you talk about income inequality or wealth inequality. Those are different concepts. But which one is more serious or more urgent issue for you that we should address?
Well, both are important. Wealth inequality partly comes from the inequality of income, from the inequality in ability to save and accumulate out of income. But inequality of wealth maybe is more serious because in the long run it also depends on the accumulation of inherited wealth within families. Sometimes it also involves natural resources. So, you know, the inequality of oil or natural resources in the world, you know, is an important part of the you know, very large fortune in the world. You know, it's not only innovation. You know, you also have oil that is playing an important role. You know, the Russian oligarchs, you know, they did not make much innovation. You know, they just happen to own a lot of oil. And then once you have large funds, you know, sometimes it tends to increase by itself because you can generate higher financial returns when you start from higher portfolios than when you have a small saving. So the dynamics of wealth inequality involves forces that often lead to even more extreme inequality and concentration than the inequality of labor income. But on the other hand, the inequality of labor income, is also very important, because this is what allows, some people to get a good paying jobs and some people not to access a good paying job. So, in Taiwan, average wages have been not doing so well over the past 15 years, and this certainly involves the issues of access to skills, access to high productivity jobs. And so, in my book, I try to look at all these different dimensions of inequality, and all are important, but they involve different economic forces and mechanisms and different solutions.
You seem to imply different countries have different type of problem. Like you mentioned, the old world, Europe and Japan, they are more of a wealth inequality. Rather in the States, the new world, it's more like income inequality. Could you distinguish why do you have that kind of generalization on that?
So what we observe in recent decades is indeed that in the US you have a much bigger rise in income inequality than in Europe and Japan. So the top income share in the US has increased a lot more than in Europe and Japan. For instance, the share of national income in the US going to the top 10% of the population used to be about 1/3 of total income around 1980, and now it's closer to 1/2. So this is a big increase which you don't see in Europe and Japan, where the rise in inequality is much more moderate in magnitude. The explanation is complex, and it probably involves first a very high inequality in access to education and skills in the US. So, top universities are very good, of course, but the bottom 50% of the US population does not have access to Harvard, or doesn't even have access to high-quality high schools. Corporate governance problems and the ability of top managers in the US sometimes to set for themselves a pay package that have little to do with their performance is also an important part of the rise of inequality. In Europe and Japan, the rise in top income shares has been less extreme. In countries like Taiwan and Korea, it seems also intermediate between European, Japan patterns and the US patterns. Different countries have different institutions, different rules, different system of education, different workings of labor market and corporate governance, and this contribute to different pattern of income inequality.
I was about to ask you whether the US or the New World seem to have a more fair equality issue than in Europe. But you mentioned also that although CEO in the United States, they are getting more than they deserve. So that's another source of inequality, right?
Yes, that's a big problem. Of course.
The question I want to ask you at first is that it seems that by income, it's related with meritocracy. That is when you are able, you can get more money. That is not inherent or anything like that, right?
Right. So in principle, inequality of labor income is more based on merit than inequality of inherited wealth. Now the problem is that sometimes it is not completely the case. So of course the winners of the game always want to say that they merit their very high wage or labor income or top managerial compensation, and that this is in the interest of everybody. But I think we have to put these claims under public scrutiny and examine really the argument and the evidence. And what we can see in the US case is first that very top managerial pay does not always come with extra performance or extra job creation. Sometimes it's just too much. And now if we think of the education system, it's not clear that you really have equal opportunity to education. In the book, I show that the average income of the parents of Harvard University students right now is equivalent to the average income of the top 2% of the distribution of US family income. So, this doesn't look like meritocracy to me. And so this has to do with the very high tuition fees. This also has to do with the fact that you tend to make gifts to your universities, around the time your children apply. This is not really meritocracy to me. So, the very strong beliefs in meritocracy sometimes are not completely consistent with the evidence. So that's why it's important to not to take these claims for granted and to try to look at the evidence we have.
Okay, we're going to take a break. We'll be right back. 我们等一下回来继续跟皮卡迪教授来谈，尤其是怎么样子用什么方法能够达到更平等的一个社会。